Hi, this is Shep Varghese. Welcome to the Faith Colloquium podcast. Today my guest is Kyle Maestri. Kyle was among one of the first graduating classes of the Torrey Honors Program at Biola, and he studied philosophy there. He also earned a master's degree at Northern Arizona University, and he's the headmaster of Trinity Christian School in Prescott, Arizona. I knew him as Mr. Maestri for most of my life. He was a teacher and mentor to me throughout junior high and high school, and I'm very much indebted to him for his wisdom. So thanks, Kyle, and thank you for talking with me today.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's a joy to be here.
Yeah. So in college, your major was philosophy.
Yes.
I'm curious to hear why you decided to pursue that major, and if you were thinking that you would get into Christian education after college.
Well, I really just looked at the catalog of majors and I thought, what will help me get the best job after college? That's really what it came down to for me.
Right.
No, really, it was more of a personal journey. I'd like to say I had sort of noble reasons that I was, really wanting to understand the world or things, but really it was more of a personal decision related to trying to figure out some real deep questions I had about me, about God. My home life growing up had great things about it. I had amazing parents, but we went through a lot of difficult things. And I think going through those early years of just lots of struggles with God, struggles with my faith, doubting, questioning, really drove me deeper. And I was always drawn to the deeper questions and loved dialogue and conversation about things that mattered. And so I think that was a lot of where I was thinking about when I chose philosophy, which consequently I didn't choose right away. It was sort of the path for me was I went undeclared at first and then ended up looking around at the university for the first year or two and kind of thought about who I wanted to learn from and who I really wanted to be around. And turned out the philosophy teachers were kind of at the top end of that list for me. So that was what that was about. As far as being in education afterwards, probably the people in philosophy have the least practical or pragmatic thoughts when they choose their major. So that was definitely me. I wasn't thinking like, gosh, what will I do someday with this? No, I was just thinking, I want to read these books and talk about these things. And so at some point, I think I felt like maybe I'd go on to PhD studies, but ultimately that has not been my path. Instead, I've gone through the K-12 education world, which I'm grateful for.
Yeah. So when you first taught me, I think I was in 7th grade, and that was like your first year teaching. Is that right?
Yeah, that was my first year of teaching.
Okay.
In the morning, I taught younger kids, and in the afternoon, I taught older kids, where I ran into you, I think.
Yeah. And so that first year that when you started teaching, did you find that these like philosophical ideas that you had encountered in college were things that you were utilizing or applying with your students?
I think in some ways, obviously there was a whole host of practical considerations, learning how to interact with students at different ages, working with parents, figuring out lesson plans and just the craft of teaching.
Yeah.
But for me, a lot of it, the philosophy part really taught me, I knew how to think. I knew how to learn something for myself. I knew how to interact with people and think about their motivations, think about where their ideas are coming from. And ultimately, that became a well of a place that I drew on while working to inspire young minds to do the same, to think a little more deeply about the world, to be rigorous in their writing and their thinking.
Right.
And those sorts of things. And so, ultimately, and then I had the awesome privilege every now and then of having a student like you who comes and says, let's read Plato in 7th grade. And so I remember we sat at lunch for like 2.5 years reading Plato's Republic together and just talking about it. And that was really, I don't know if I've ever told you this, but that was a very formational experience for me as a teacher, maybe as much as it was for you as a student.
Yeah, I think I probably understood like 25% of all of that. I think it was just like, I get to read Plato. This is so much fun.
Yeah, I think I probably understood about 26% of it, maybe. So that was we were in good shoes.
Yeah, and I think I remember, and I guess this makes sense because you taught me logic, but I think I remember like kind of clarity of thought and clarity of language being something that you really tried to impress upon students. So I remember you doing these exercises with us where we would practice writing these dialogues, kind of like Plato's dialogues.
Yeah.
And that was a way for us to really be able to articulate our own thoughts clearly, but also be able to understand what our classmate might be saying and not try to caricature their idea or straw man it or anything like this.
Yes.
But actually have to say, like, this is what this person said. This is the argument. And now how do we respond to that?
Yeah, and I think that's half the skill that some people miss, that I love engaging in myself, as well as modeling and teaching for my students. Anyone who's observed a junior high debate knows that it's sort of, character one makes point A, character two ignores everything that character one said and makes point B, character one that mischaracterizes the point that character two made and argues against something they didn't say.
Right.
And, before you have all this cross traffic where everybody's talking about the things they want to talk about, but nothing about what the other person was actually saying or thinking. And so I think that's one of the biggest mistakes we make.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that might be something that happens beyond junior high as well.
Yeah, it might be. I certainly have seen a lot of that in pop culture today. But yeah, I think that's just human nature. Is I want to talk about sort of whatever my saw is, whatever my soapbox is, instead of actually listening and conversing with each other. My mentor, they one of the things they emphasized for me in the Tory program was that we have to listen to each other. We have to truly listen. Very few people can actually listen to what someone says and then tell back what that person said with clarity and fairness, and without, mischaracterizing or being usually ugly about the other person's position. And so I think that's really key, particularly when you're applying to things like evangelism or even, even in our own marriages. I think I could continue to learn that.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Later on, so now you're working more in, I guess, administrative role, but you do still do some teaching though, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I still teach worldviews. I thankfully they let me continue to stay in the classroom.
Yeah. So I guess in a class like that, it seems like it's maybe more apparent how you could implement philosophy in a worldview kind of class. Yeah.
And that's where my passion for philosophy comes through, is really where it hits the street. I think the other discipline and the work of philosophy is for other people to do well, and I don't have anything against that. But for me, it's really about where it hits the street and where it hits the life, and how I can interact with individuals at a popular level.
Yeah. And in terms of the administrative work that you've been doing, do you find that you've drawn from the wisdom tradition and how you analyze problems? Or
yeah, that's a good question. So I guess in some ways, learning how to dialogue with people, learning how to listen has been tremendous in conflict resolution as an administrator.
Yeah.
I tend to love strategic planning, which requires reasoning through scenarios. I thrive in conflict management and strategic planning. Those are two areas that I would say probably the philosophy really has helped me in those areas. I think also just interacting with young people about challenges in their life and being able to listen and problem solve and think through those things with them, as well as just get comfortable with tension. I think that's one of the greatest things philosophy gives you, is a recognition that I'm not going to put all this together perfectly, but that there's going to be a side to this that's not going to fit, and I'm going to be okay with that, and I'm going to try to live that way as best I can to work that out. But tension is a part of human life that I think philosophy teaches you.
So the work that I'm doing right now has a lot to do with virtue, and when I think about the kinds of possible influences I may have had in developing this passion for virtue and living well, I think about something that you would frequently say. I think don't know if you said it to me or to all of us, but I remember you frequently saying things like, well, like if you know how to get a 4.0 GPA, if you know how to get like an A on a test, but like you're, a complete jerk, or you aren't willing to help your classmates when they need it, like you're actually not truly learning. This is like I think this is my memory of what you said. You may have said it better than what I just did. But could you speak a little bit about like that, the idea of living well, living according to flourishing your character, and not just reducing education to like this kind of purely cognitive activity?
Yeah, I think I appreciate you saying that. I think certainly the sentiment that you're describing is something I'm passionate about. This idea that we can't just reduce education to either information transfer or even just merely an intellectual exercise. I mean, even the side of the aisle that says, well, okay, we agree it's not just information. We need to teach people how to think really hard. Okay, well, that's great, but that's only going to take you so far. I mean, modern philosophy ended up in postmodernism for a reason. There was an ignorance of certain realities of mankind, that man is whole.
Yeah.
And man is meant to be relational. Man is meant to be in relationship to his God, in relationship to others, and there's elements of that are you just can't take that and information transfer, that sort of thing. You really have to wrestle with these kinds of things for life, and that's one thing I love about the work that we do in classical education, is that we're, besides just rejecting the deep pragmatism that our secular cultures created education to be at this point, we also just are passionate about preparing people to live life well. We believe that there is an objective reality, there is an objective way that people flourish, and we want them to learn that. And I think that's to our demise. Our culture has forgotten much of that wisdom.
Yeah.
So I think being to a place where, Apostle Paul said it really well. If I speak with the tongues of men and of angels and have not love, I am nothing.
Yeah.
And just, I can go to the heights of education and have all these things, but if I don't really love the people or love the God behind the standards, then, really, I think Lewis would say classical education can create clever devils without virtue. We really can make what I call logic monsters. In a tradition that teaches students to be sharp and to think well and to be clear and all the things we talked about before, but leaves out this part about having love and compassion and humility, understanding the human condition for themselves and looking at other people through that lens, and then really dedicating your life to that. Then you're really you're not doing the world any favors. You're just making even more clever devils. So
yeah, that's good. I certainly saw those temptations in my junior high and high school self, and I remember you saying, like, again, I think modeling this after Christ, you need to be a servant to your classmates, and so I'm grateful for that wisdom.
Yeah, I'm grateful for it as well. As my mentors still talk to me about that you can't get to a place where you feel like you've got this thing down so well that you can't see everybody around you and be able to reach them, and with empathy and really great teaching requires empathy. You're not really teaching if you don't have empathy. You're just instructing. Mm-hmm. There's a difference.
Yeah. You mentioned pragmatism, and I know this is something we've talked about before. So, there's this way of thinking about school that's very popular that says, like, look, school doesn't really prepare you for life, right? Like, graduate from high school, graduate from college, and then I have to do these things like figure out, mortgage stuff and figure out taxes and figure out all these things that I never was prepared for that. What the heck, right? So I'm curious to hear what your thoughts would be about this, the kind of pragmatic culture that we live in.
Yeah, I think it's one of the great tragedies of the modern world is the really creating a false dichotomy between what you might call the philosophical life and the pragmatic life. Choosing one over the other. You have your most people they hear you and I say things like philosophy, and they think of their philosophy class from college where, somebody waxed eloquent and they didn't understand much and they weren't real interested, and they might think of somebody doing slam poetry at Starbucks or something, right? Doing deep thinking that's not really deep. And then they think of pragmatism, and you think of the businessman who's on the top of his game and all that sort of thing. And I just think that, like so many things, I think Nancy Pearcey does this work so well in all of her works, where she just says, find the reduction. And the reduction is we've reduced mankind to one or the other of those things. And he's both. It's not an either or, it's a both and. Like so many things in the modern way of thinking, we've truncated half of life and much to our detriment. So I think being able to I think it'd be fantastic if instead we had men at the top of their game in business and economy who can think well and are virtuous and have just souls, and that we have pastors who know how to do their taxes. Why does it have to be one or the other? So I think that classical education as a movement today, as well as from its core, just really rejects the false dichotomy there and says, no, I can do poetry and calculus, or I can do, I can grocery shop, have a good marriage, and know how to fix my car, rather than being one or the other. We specialize to our demise.
So I think I've heard you say, like, if you teach the kind of classical philosophical way, like the pragmatism will follow. But if you reduce it to just the pragmatism, then you probably you're not going to get like the deeper life of the mind and the pursuit of wisdom.
Yeah, I would I would hope that's the case. I unfortunately, I know a lot of people who have, besides just pragmatism, to be fair to or to be fair to the rest of those, and sort of some self-criticism of those of us in philosophy, which I don't put myself there by any means, but those who've chosen philosophy as a field, many of them have split the baby on the other side and sort of struggle with simple tasks while they're writing these significant philosophical tomes. They're struggling with relationship or economic concerns, and I just think, again, I don't know that you always get one for the other, but I do think that the goal should be to, obviously there's going to be people with certain bents towards economic concerns and certain bents towards philosophical concerns, but that doesn't mean we can't have growth in both of those areas for both individuals, not to mention community. Okay, so maybe let's say I'm a philosopher who doesn't do well with his taxes. Well, I wasn't meant to live alone. And so maybe I can have somebody else that I'm close to, that I cultivate a relationship with, that can help me with my taxes, and vice versa. Maybe my tax guy can learn some things from the philosopher. Maybe that's a little idealistic, but I just think that that's the vision that we should be putting out there. Is we just constantly want to disintegrate and the project of the kingdom of God, and as I read the scriptures, and the project of classical education, and as I understand that tradition, is really to say, let's not pull these things apart. Let's put them together, even if we have to do so in community. So
this kind of backtracks to an earlier topic, but I remember you saying to me, I think I was like frustrated with somebody, and I was kind of talking with you about this, and you said to me, I think one of the most important questions you can ask somebody is, why do you think that? And it's still been a question that when I hear people speak, I think it's become owned it in such a way that it's probably a lot more sincere than it was like when I was a junior high kid. So like it's a kind of a genuine, like, oh, like why do you think that? I'm curious to hear your reasons for why you think that. But could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think, for me, I guess the one way to approach this is that a little bit of my history walking through the philosophy program at Biola, there was a point at which I was accused of really being a psychologist who hangs out with the philosophers, because that was where my interest was. I'm most interested in again, how this hits mankind, motivations, relationships, sense of self, sense of identity, action, behavior, belief, faith, all those different things. And so I think that if enough people just cared, like when someone says something, so often, honestly, as our life plays out, we're often starting to think about what we're going to say next rather than really asking genuine questions and being sincerely interested in the person next to us. I think that's one of the greatest ways we can love people today is just ask good questions of them and listen and truly care, not just as sort of a technique to get what we want, not just sort of as but genuinely, I really want to know, why are you doing this? What's going on? And how can I work through that with you or think through that with you?
Yeah.
Because everything, ultimately you end up having certain causes, and there's certain patterns that you can start to recognize and be able to help people with those things. Because truth, it's not just objective in the sense of the sort of abstract realm, but it's true in the sense of there's a true way to have a relationship. There's a true way to understand myself. There's a true way to interact with other people. And if I can ask those questions, I can start to understand maybe the ways in which that truth has gone awry in a person and maybe try to help however I can.
I'm thinking about these Platonic dialogues. I mean, was that an influence at all in this? Because, I mean, everything's driven by questioning, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was really the way that the Torrey program taught us Socratically, where there was just lots and lots of questions for 3 hours on end, as well as my appreciation for the Platonic dialogue. Now, obviously, I'm not a scholar enough to be able to talk about the distinctions between the way that Socrates talks and the way that Jesus interacts and things, but I see Jesus doing a very similar thing when he talks through the Gospels. Asking questions of people. What are you seeking? What do you want? Who do men say that I am? Who do you say that I am? These kinds of questions that really are probing. And I think that's one of the best ways to just lead people towards truth, is let them discover through questions and through transformative thinking of their own, rather than trying to pry them open with my deep insights. Those deep insights come from time to time as they ask a question. But until the question's asked, sometimes the person's not ready to hear the answer. Yeah. So I think that's been a big part for me. That's just what good mentors have done for me all my life. Yeah. Just ask me really good questions. I think one person said it well, that, some people think the problem is people don't really know the answers. And someone said, no, I think the bigger problem is people aren't even asking the right questions. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a bigger issue.
Was there anything else you wanted to share about the way you've brought philosophy into education, or maybe the current state of education right now, and how we can think more carefully? And
yeah, I mean, I've been thinking quite a bit the last few years about that journey from just intellectual dialogue to life. And I think certainly Jamie Smith's thoughts on this have been very formational for me, bringing us back to an Augustinian way of defining mankind as not what they believe, not what they know, not sort of this cerebral worldview emphasis like they do in my camp, but saying, what do they love? Really reflecting on the scriptures of Deuteronomy 6 is one of our favorite scriptures in Christian education. And, it's instructive that the key thing that God says to parents that he wants them to do for their children is teach them to love certain things, not just know. It's not, hey, I want your children to know these things. I want children to love these things. And so really adjusting in my thinking and my interaction with students and parents and everybody else, my goal is no longer just to help people know things. My goal is to go beyond and say, well, how can I get them to love the right things in the right manner, in the right way, to the right degree, as Augustine talked about it, as for properly ordered loves. Yeah. I think that is, to me, the ultimate goal of education, is that we're shaping the loves of people to love the right things in the right order, in the right way, in the right manner. Yeah. And that's ultimately how we know we're winning or not, is what do our students love?
Yeah.
That's a much harder project, but it's also much more exciting, I think.
Right. And it sounds like that's a project that couldn't be done simply by reading hard books and memorizing stuff and stuff like that. That sounds like that takes human beings involved in relationships. And
yeah, and I think that's part of it too. I think the online push for education, or even just the minimal interaction push for education, just pushes that pragmatic line even further, and people miss out on so much to be gained from a relational connection in education. And I've just kind of staked our flag there. For better or worse. We're going to be a relational school. We're going to be using terms like mentorship all the time. We're going to be encouraging students into those kinds of relationships. We're going to push back against sort of the online knowledge dump, if you will, and much more towards interaction and conversation. And then I think the last thing I'll say about that is, and this is part of Jamie Smith's work too, that's really made me think, is what the role of beauty is in education. How to involve beauty in the conversation and in the experience of the educational endeavor. That's another topic that is very challenging, but I think there's a lot there. I think it was, I don't know, some quote, I don't know that I can get it right, but I think Dostoevsky was saying something, and I think Solzhenitsyn quoted him when I read it, but something about thinking of the goodness, truth, and beauty as three trees in a culture, and that when goodness and truth are burned down, and beauty will rise from the ashes and do the work of all three. I'm very compelled by that. I think there's something to that there's traps that can be found in all three areas for sure, but beauty gets at that love piece. It gets at that desire piece, which ultimately, I think Willard was saying this once too about Jesus, that one of the most compelling questions that Jesus ever asked people, and that Willard says is the most compelling question we could ask anyone, is what do you seek? What do you desire? What are you after? And I think that getting into conversations about those things and having thoughts about that as faculty members in terms of the experience of the students, not just the conversations we're having, but the experience of the students, what would that look like if we were able to shoot for those targets? I think those are some of those places to scratch into getting into some virtue formation that is important.
Yeah, that's really helpful. That's really good. Thank you.
If you don't mind, I'll tell you one more story. Can I tell you one more story?
Yeah, go ahead.
I was sitting with a student. This was when I really got turned on to this idea of desire and love being the target, and started seeking for something more. I was sitting with a student who just finished our high school 2 years prior, and I was sitting at a coffee shop with him after he left high school and did sort of the proverbial U-turn. He was in the worship band, and he was in our worldviews class and gave the right answers and he got decent grades, did okay. And then when he left high school, he kind of did the proverbial U-turn and started couch surfing, and I think he was probably smoking and drinking and just different areas, smoking pot, different things he was doing. And I remember sitting at a coffee with him about 1.5 years, 2 years later, and I just said, you know the truth, this isn't right. This isn't going to lead to a good place. I don't know if I said something that eloquent, but I just kind of said something along those lines. And he said to me, he looked me in the eyes and he said, "Yeah, you're right. I do know. I just don't want it right now." Now, for me, that was just one of those moments of like, okay, I've known intuitively that knowledge for a long time, that knowledge wasn't the whole thing.
Yeah.
But then I really understood it. That desire, that love, shaping loves was a much more important project than what all the students knew. And so I've been really trying to recalibrate that among the faculty and among ourselves. And boy, it's tough to think about that. I would seek anyone's wisdom on that to know better how to do that.
Yeah. Which is what you were saying before. That sounds like that would also take that's like a community effort. That's not a single-handed, like one teacher can do that. That's like lots of lots of models in front of you who themselves love beauty and love truth that you can imitate.
I think you're right. The thought on this that I have is Jamie Smith seems to be onto something with cultural liturgies. This idea that practices shape us. This idea that habit formation. And in fact, habit formation is one of the ways that we have. It's a language that I've introduced to our culture the last 2 years through Charlotte Mason's work on this, where she really focused on habit formation being the rails on which a life can run well. And so you think of children through that lens, and that we're forming certain habits in them, rather than thinking of it as we're moving from one piece of information or one section of skills to another. We're forming certain habits in them. We have mental habits, we have religious habits, we have physical habits, we have emotional habits. And so thinking through that, and that's really been my own personal journey as well in this area. And so I think thinking about cultural liturgies and what habits are being formed while we're performing our day.
Yeah.
That doesn't, that may have more to do with how we come into a classroom, how we approach a stranger in the hallway.
Yeah.
How we open a door or just ignore the person in front of us.
Right.
All of those kinds of things. What's sort of the unspoken norm in the hallways is more what we're going for. In fact, Sheb, we've gone as far as we have painted our classrooms beautiful colors to model more like a home. We have put beautiful artwork around. We've begun to put students on instruments like violins and trying to go further in this way to see what kind of habits we can form in a soul, rather than just and in some ways give them paradigms of normalcy. Because a lot of education is doing that. It's providing you with unspoken norms.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a lot of work to be done there that might be part of the key. Like I said, give me 20 more years and I might have something more intelligent to say.
About this love thing. And I think, especially high school students, I think have a sense of when people fake it,
Oh yeah, authenticity is king.
Right. And so I think when you're presented with models who have themselves this genuine love for the truth, for goodness, for beauty, and it's not faked, right? It's like it seems real. I think that really is compelling. And when I think about you, when I was a high school student, I think what was kind of strange but also compelling about who you were was I knew Christians who loved Jesus, or maybe like sincere in their faith and things like this, but they didn't seem like real thoughtful people. What was so compelling about you was like, here's a person who can read Plato with me and talk about logic and all this stuff, but also talks about Jesus like he's this real person that he can talk to and loves and all this stuff. And I think that was what was so strange, but also compelling, that you were able to say, hey, you can be a thoughtful, intelligent person who loves wisdom, who loves, the tradition of old thinkers, but also have passions and affections for Christ. And there's no conflict between those two things. And I think that was what was really compelling. And I think I felt like that was a rare thing that I saw growing up.
Gosh, I'm very grateful for that feedback. That's awesome to hear. That warms my heart, definitely, to hear that that's part of what was caught. Perhaps if we spent more time building the virtue of our teachers than giving them tips and tricks of pedagogy, we would have a better landscape in education. I really feel like that's been critical to our success. One of the most, I don't know if I could say the most, that's probably hyperbole, but one of the most significant jobs I have felt the most responsibility for since I've sat in this seat of leading a classical school is who comes in to model, who comes in to be as an example to my students of what it's like to be a disciple of Jesus.
Yeah.
I like to think of it this way, that students need desperately need in this world, us as families, as parents, as pastors, as leaders. They need us to show them what it looks like to walk through all the different pieces of life as a follower of Jesus. What does it look like to walk through cancer as a follower of Jesus? What does it look like to walk through divorce as a follower of Jesus? What does it look like to walk through a very successful marriage as a follower of Jesus? What does it look like to have great success as a businessman and be wealthy as a follower of Jesus? What does it look like to be on food stamps as a follower of Jesus? You just said it, right? The things that you remember most are the things about your teachers, not the things they said.
Yeah.
So much of this work is to be done in relationship and with authentic people. And it drives us as teachers back to our knees to never allow the spirit of expert into our schools. I am not an expert. I am a learner. I am on a journey, and I'm constantly trying to grow and be transformed by the renewing of my mind so that I can be an even sharper vessel in the master's hand, period. That's what it's about, over and over. So, gosh, I'm so grateful to hear the feedback that you're giving, but I think that's a constant journey, is to walk through life with students. This would be maybe a good way to capture it. I think it was Douglas Wilson who said years ago, he defined teaching in such a way that's, teaching is loving what we love with students that we love. And that's an interesting way to define teaching, that you're loving what you love with students that you love. Because if you ask, and any survey will tell you that students are most impacted by teachers who do three things. One, they're passionate about their subject. Two, they know that they love them. And three, that they show evidence that they're prepared and learning themselves. Those are the things that students want to see over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So I just think love is the answer. Maybe that's sounds like a 80s song or something, but really I think that it comes back to that in education. We can't lose sight of that. Seeking the wisdom from God and recognizing that that's really what this life's about, and then being able to give that to other people is the greatest treasure of teaching, I'd say.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah. Thank you for the time. It's been fun.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please subscribe and please share with your friends.